Hi TYB, well welcome to the beautiful Sydney Harbour and welcome to the Book of Job. Congratulations on wanting to study this book. It's a really good book to wrestle with because I think in our mind some people just ignore Job, and I'm not going to address that book because God seems like a narcissistic God who's a dictator who's just playing with Job like a little ant, but that's not at all what this text is about. When you really sit in this text, it is a beautiful text of this man, this righteous, blameless man before God that is dealing with suffering. He's dealing with things that are happening in his life and he's talking about it. I love the fact that the book of Job is giving us permission to talk about things and to talk about suffering and to voice our opinion before God. So I hope you really love this book. Now, it's in our writing section of the Old Testament. So remember, with our writing section, you are going to read, it's going to be kind of metaphors and beautiful imagery that you're going to have to wrestle with. Now, Job is an actual man. Some historians say, well, maybe this was a poetry, maybe he wasn't real. You can have a read of that. But in James 5:11, James actually says that Job was steadfast and patient and addresses Job. In Ezekiel 14, it says, if Job, Daniel, and Noah were in the city and talks about these three righteous men as the pinnacle of righteousness, if Job, Noah, and Daniel, you've got to remember when you read this book that Job is blameless before God. Because what happens is his three so-called friends and Elihu come in and say, the things that are happening to you are because you were sinning before God, or God's angry with you, and all of these things. We're going to address in the dive this week how much as Christians we have this mindset that if things go wrong in people's lives, I've had people come up to me and go, well, you must be sinning, or you must... Don't even go there. The book of Job refutes that because from the beginning we have God's perspective. And God's perspective is shown to us as kind of an insider information. We are the only ones in the story as the audience reading this book that knows that God thinks Job is blameless. And the conversation with Satan wasn't about that he's sinful and being punished like all the other friends of Job suggest, but because he is righteous and upstanding before God, and because God's provision was over his life. Satan says, well, lift your provision and see how you go. We're going to talk about that on the website, so jump on and have a look at the dives. Whoever wrote this book, and we don't know who wrote this book, was a literary genius. It is long, okay, it's 42 chapters. And I have to say, the cycles, we're going to talk about the cycles in the next snapshot, they can be a little bit repetitive, so stick with it. It's like reading Leviticus. You just got to keep going, keep plowing through, have a look at the imagery, highlight the different things. But this literary genius has written an account of a righteous man that loses everything. And he's dealing with suffering. He's dealing with staying faithful to God. How do you stay faithful to God when everything goes wrong? And these three so-called friends come in to give him wisdom. Don't you love the Christians that come in and give you wisdom at the times that you're in the moment of suffering? And they are almost these friends that come in and say, we'll tell you what God thinks. As I said in the beginning of this snapshot, we know what God thinks of Job, but his friends are God's interpreters. And it's quite funny because as you're reading it, you can imagine God sitting in heaven going, what? They're representing me, and that's not at all what is happening. So when you finally get to the place at the end where God speaks for himself, it is so amazing. So stick with it as you wrestle through. Now, this beautiful book, can I say that when people teach this book, they're like, you know, Job was a man who was silent in his suffering. 30 chapters of pretty much Job's voice of the whole thing. So when someone says to you, chapter 1 and 2, yes, he is a beautiful silent, he doesn't sin against God in his voice, and uses that to say you must be silent in your suffering, it's wrong. Because this is a book showing us that we can actually voice our opinion. We can actually say to God, we don't go with him in anger, but we can actually say to God, what the heck's going on? This is hard to wrestle with. This is hard to deal with, God. Show me your perspective, because right now and I love Job. He actually says to his friends, you're useless at wisdom. I want to go before God. I want God to answer me. And God does. If you want God to answer you, and you are questioning, you asking God to answer you, get ready when he does answer you, because I love the end of this book where God says, I'm here and I'm answering. And Job is just awestruck. So this is one man suffering with suffering and pain and really the wisdom of God in this situation. As you read it, wrestle with it. Because I've got to say, as you read this, now can I show you some tools to read it? Because you're reading poetry, you're reading wisdom literature, get some tools around what wisdom literature was and what ancient Near East understanding was in those wisdom literature. Great book. There's a chapter in this. This is on the website as a book review. The Tree of Life, there's a great chapter in this on Job, so you can grab that one. And in this one, I really enjoyed the chapter as well, The Art of Biblical Poetry. And it really sits in Job how the different poetry expresses this beautiful story. We as an audience get the behind the scenes look at what's happening with this discussion between Job and Satan from the beginning. And I'm going to get you in the dive to stop and really pinpoint what God says about Job and that he's holy and blameless. Because throughout the text, the friends are going to try and contradict that. You're not holy, you're not blameless, you're sinful, you're this. This is why, speaking on behalf of God, of course, this is why it's happened. And the whole time Job's like, no, I am right before God. I am holy, I am blameless. There's got to be another perspective on this. Christians have advice when we go through suffering, maybe you've experienced that it's just simply wrong. And you know what? Sometimes in your suffering and in your pain, you've got to just not listen to your friends of Job, not listen to those guys, those godly wisdom, and just get the voice of God and say, what is going on? Give me a higher view of this because I don't understand. So Job is really going to wrestle with that concept. As I said, the author is unknown. But this author was a genius. The time of the book is unknown as well. It's really a unique book. Anywhere between Moses and Ezra, which is a long time in Old Testament history, but we really don't know. Really what this book is about is hitting the culture of the day. Can I explain this to you? It's an ancient Near East text that is showing a side of suffering. And in ancient Near East, especially Israelite, the first thing you've got to notice in this book is Job and his friends are not Israelites. That's big. I'm going to show you in some of the dive, some of these things that I want you to study because we just simply don't have time to go through this. They're from the land of Uz, which reminds me of the land of Oz, but it's not. It's the land of Uz, U-Z. And they're outside Israel. But still they have a very Israelite theology. This book of Job brings out an Israelite theology and an Israelite understanding of and really contradicts the Israelite understanding of suffering. Let me explain that. The Israelite understanding of suffering is like in Proverbs. If you are righteous before God and you do the right things before God, then you will be prosperous. If you are sinning before God and you do wrong things by God, then you'll be cursed. And they had this very simplistic view of God, and you can see it in Proverbs. Blessed is the man who does this, and the righteous will do this. The righteous are always blessed, and the fool or the wicked always have calamity around them, or things go wrong. But what Job does is challenges that Israelite understanding and says, what happens if God just lifts his providence, not because that man is sinning or has it? What happens if God just lifts that divine providence off the man? And it's humanity wrestling with, we thought God was in a box. We thought he was simple. And so the friends are saying, Job, you must have sinned because that's the way God works. This is about man wrestling with a God that doesn't fit in their tiny little box. This is about man saying, wait a second, we know as the audience that's not what's happening. God is just doing something new like God does, doing something different. So really wrestle with this text and wrestle with this understanding that God is a God of mercy and justice. And I love that he's in the beginning bragging on Job. And then have a look at these so-called friends. Who needs enemies when you've got friends like these that tell him that he's sinning and he's done something wrong? And imagine God in heaven going, these guys have no idea what I'm doing. Have fun as you venture into this book of Job.